but just little story about how you got your scar and what it tells you about yourself, the strength that it expresses about you. Would anyone like to share a story? Well, thank you for sharing your stories, those of you who shared. And I know that there are a lot of stories because everybody has different types of scars. So thank you for those of you who are keeping other stories in your hearts. No matter how you earned your scar, whether it's on your body or in your heart or on your spirit, it's part of you now. And you don't have to see it as a flaw. It can be your badge of courage too, if you choose to see it that way and carry it with dignity. Much of our self-talk is negative because we measure ourselves against inappropriate ideals. We berate ourselves for not attaining this ideal, and our self-esteem slides lower and lower. A friend once said to me, "I don't know how you manage to do everything you do. I wish I were as good a mother as you." I was kind of shocked, and I said, "You have got to be kidding. Ellen, we both work, we both volunteer, we both maintain households, and we have 101 demands on our time. However, you also gathered all the neighborhood kids together, put them in costumes, created a stage in your garage, invited all the parents, and had a theater. So I've always wanted to be as good a mom as you are." Well, the truth is we're both darn good moms. But we let our inner critic tell us that somebody else was doing it better because they did it differently than we did. Body image is another area where our inner critic has a field day because few of us have the ability to look at ourselves objectively. Researchers studied 100 healthy women and asked them to approximate the size of their bodies. 95% of them overestimated their body size by 25% on average. 55% of women and 45% of men are dissatisfied with their bodies, and college-age men report less satisfaction with their bodies than did older generations of men. So why does this happen? Well, most likely because we hold ourselves up to unrealistic ideals. We have so much input relating to what we should look like or how we should act that we fail to honor or even realistically see our natural state. So this brings me to my fourth rule, the rule of rejection. When we're faced with an impossible ideal, whether it relates to lifetime accomplishments, interpersonal relationships, or physical beauty or ability, we should reject the ideal, not ourselves. Comedian Jay Leno put it this way: there are more overweight people today in America than average weight people. So overweight people are now average, which means that you've just met your New Year's resolution not to be overweight. That's not to say we shouldn't aspire to be healthy or fit, but perhaps our role models should change as we move through life. Older adults should seek out healthy contemporaries as role models rather than celebrities whose bodies have yet to bear children or do a life's work and who haven't yet taken on the natural curves and changes of age. A lot of inner critic talk stems from our childhood, from the hurtful messages that we get from other children, from our teachers, from our family members and caregivers in the media, and from prejudice and stigma in our society. We repeat these messages over and over, and if we aren't careful, they can lead to uncontrolled anxiety, guilt, and depression that triggers stress hormones that literally kill immune system cells. They can watch that under a microscope. Cortisol literally killing immune system cells, and cortisol is what's released when we're anxious and stressed. So we repeat these negative messages over and over and over, and if we're not going to we have to use the rule of rejection to avoid falling victim to these harmful stressors and false ideals. Now you might be thinking this sounds pretty idealistic and simplistic. Is that woman really telling us to just think happy thoughts? Well, to some degree I am. The truth is that the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. If you're lying in bed at night and you hear a noise and you think it's a prowler, your nervous system goes into overdrive. It goes into fight or flight, and your heart races, and your breathing gets shallow, and your muscles clench. Your mind races because you've told yourself there's a prowler in the house, and your brain believed you, and your body responded accordingly. Well, if we can convince our brain, that something awful has happened, we should be able to do the reverse. We should also be able to remind ourselves that we have inherent worth and dignity until our inner critic has no choice but to believe it. This idea mirrors Albert Ellis's psychotherapy model, with which he helped people stop their self-deprecation and gain a more realistic and tolerant perspective on life. My fifth rule, the rule of dilution, illustrates Ellis's concept. Imagine a cup of tea that's sicky sweet because we've added too many lumps of sugar. You can't remove the sugar, but what can you do if you still want to drink the tea? You can add more water or more tea. You can dilute the sweetness. Now imagine that the sugar represents our negative thoughts. We can't make negative thoughts disappear. That's in our who we are. But we can dilute them by understanding where they're coming from and by reframing them into more positive messages, like we did with the scar stories. It's true that sometimes diluting our inner critics' comments can be difficult, especially when it mirrors comments from people on the outside of us, people who belittle us or hurt us or bully us or harass us. It may feel next to impossible to rise above that negativity, and we may fall into a pit of despair and hopelessness. At these times, we can return to the rule of acceptance, which directs us to love ourselves and ask for and accept help from people who care about us, such as our fellow UUs and friends and family who have pledged to affirm and promote our inherent worth and dignity as well as their own. Let's reflect on today's story for all ages and the lessons that it taught us. We're all cracked pots. We're all imperfect. But rather than decreasing our worth, our imperfections can enhance it. I chose today's prelude, which is called The Riddle, the song, because the song posits that the reason for our existence is to ponder the big questions, like what's the reason for the world, and who am I? Well, we won't find the answers if we're busy berating ourselves for our imperfection and our weaknesses. We need to free ourselves from self-doubt, embarrassment, and shame so we can focus on what's really important. In their book, The Art of Happiness at Work, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Howard Cutler, MD, wrote, "To have greater self-awareness or understanding means to have a better grasp of reality. Now, the opposite of reality is to project onto yourself qualities that are not there. Ascribe to yourself characteristics in contrast to what is actually the case. When you have a distorted view of yourself caused by excessive pride and arrogance, you have an exaggerated sense of your qualities and personal abilities. Your view of your own abilities go far beyond your actual abilities. On the other hand, when you have low self-esteem, you underestimate your actual abilities and qualities. You belittle yourself. You put yourself down. This leads to a complete loss of faith in yourself. So excess, both in terms of exaggeration and devaluation, are equally destructive. By addressing these obstacles and by constantly examining your personal character, qualities, and abilities, you can learn to have greater self-understanding. This is the way to become more self-aware. If we are self-aware enough to appreciate our own worth and dignity, we will have the emotional energy to reach out to help others. We just need to remember the rules. The rule of two. Use care when you describe yourself as to anything. The rule of could. Don't should on yourself. The twisted golden rule. Do unto yourself as you would do unto others. The rule of rejection. Reject social norms that don't fill your spirit. The rule of dilution. Reframe negative thoughts that you have about yourself into positive terms. And the rule of acceptance. Love yourself enough to ask for and accept help when outside critics' voices are too loud to dilute and reject on your own. I will end this sermon with a poem by Unitarian Universalist minister Francis Anderson, Jr., who said, "You don't believe the way I do. It's strange that I'm so fond of you. Our differences are wide apart. What wonder I can share your heart. The way you act is odd to me. How come I hold you trustingly? I guess because despite direction, we share the gift of imperfection." When we honor our own worth and dignity, we acknowledge the special light within us. We have more confidence and energy to make a difference in each other's lives. So may you go forth and let your little light shine.